Welcome back, my friends. We are back with yet another activity for the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. This activity, which we call as the Hungry Traveling Snake, is our twist on the very popular snake game. Notice in the regular snake, our snake head must catch a food which then goes to a random position, but once the snake catches a food, it grows a tail. Now, in our case, the game is a bit different. Snake has got a bunch of foods, quite hungry. It's also traveling around the park. It must eat all this food, and we are told how many food items it has eaten. Every time it eats a food, just like regular, it gets a tail. But I must finish all these food items, and then I must bring my snake back to the very beginning where I started. Once I do that, I am told how many steps I took. Now, clearly, this, like I said, is a twist on the snake game. In fact, we can get the snake game, the regular snake game, with certain modifications to this game. But we have our own learning goals from this, and which is why we have made these modifications. So, the learning goals from this activity, well, first and foremost, we want to learn how to create interactive games in Python Turtle. Now, previously, we have used Turtle for two activities. We saw Turtle, for example, in the activity called Paint with Turtle, where we learned the basic operations. We learned how to build, let's say, a smiley. While Paint with Turtle got us face to face with the basic functionalities of Turtle, we took it further in the pixel art project where we built arbitrary patterns and we learned about for loop and commands like range through this activity. Very, very interesting activity, in fact. Now, here we are back again with Turtle, this time going to create an interactive game in Python. And we are going to do that using basically what is called the onKey command. This is very interesting because it allows the user to interact with the game by, let's say, clicking keys on the keyboard. Now you can imagine that the ideas we learn here in this project can be used for a lot of other projects, a lot of other games that you have built previously. As a matter of fact, in fact, we have built Snake game in the past. Let's just quickly look at how that looks. In fact, quite interesting. Much like the regular snake, the snake eats this apple and its tail starts to grow. Like I said, the game we are building now in Python can be modified to get something like this. But one of the learning goals here would be to sort of make a compare and contrast between how we did this in Scratch and how we are going to do this in Python. Such analysis and thinking, in fact, is very, very helpful in understanding how tools actually work, what exactly goes on behind the scene, which is obviously something that every developer should be looking at. In this process, we are also going to explore the turtle module in some detail. In fact, we'll see how we'll create multiple turtles in a single project. We will create lists of turtles, which itself becomes quite powerful, quite different from Scratch, because in Scratch we could create sprites all right, but we could not create lists of sprites. We will see how we'll use turtles to create things like game characters, score, and so on. Obviously, in all of this, there's a good amount of programming logic, fundamentally and mostly focused on lists. In fact, the logic to move the snake body along with the snake head is very, very interesting. We have previously seen one approach in Scratch. Now we are going to look at two contrasting methods, one new and one very similar to what we did in Scratch, because again, this will allow us to do a compare and contrast with how things work in Python versus, say, how they worked in Scratch. Always a good thing to think about. And finally, and this is where it gets really, really, really interesting. Remember, our game is different from a regular snake in the sense that our snake must collect a certain amount of food items and then must come back to where it started. Amazingly, this is similar to a very, very important business problem that a lot of organizations must solve, which is called the traveling salesman problem. Now, there is a lot of literature out there about traveling salesman problem. I urge you look at some of that to get an appreciation. But the idea broadly is that let's say there's a salesman, perhaps a delivery boy, perhaps a postman who has to go to many, many places. For example, on the map of US, perhaps he has to visit all these cities and must come back to his, let's say, original place. Now, clearly, if he is not careful about this, for example, let's say he chooses to visit, let's say, something on the extreme east coast, then goes back to the west coast, then to the east, it's going to be very, very inefficient. And that's not what a company would want. So the question is, what is the shortest route to visit all these locations and come back? That is a traveling salesman problem. This, in fact, this is of interest to lots and lots of organizations where we have such people traveling out, for example, for logistics, for delivery, maybe for pickup, and so on. Now, how does this link to our program? Well, think about it. Our snakehead is like our traveling salesman. Now, this link is really interesting. We'll talk more about this as we go on. But let's get started in a step-by-step manner, building this project from ground up. And that's what we are going to do in the next few videos. If you think this way of learning, where we are learning by building, by doing analysis of how things work, if this is what appeals to you, look at our website, because we learn Python programming through such fun activities. Take care. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.